to the beginning of this 2 hour event we are putting on with you all. My name is Luis Mojica. I'm going to introduce the event in a moment and everyone that's part of this with me. But for now, if you just take a moment to settle into your chair and even orient to the screen, you can look through the screen, check out, see if you know anybody here. If you want to be seen, you can turn your camera on or you can leave it off, whatever feels good for you. You will not be recorded unless you're speaking later on. So if your camera's on, you won't show up in the replay. Just keep that in mind. And just taking a moment to orient to some of the faces and again, settling into where you are, feeling the chair you're sitting in or standing, wherever you are. And just getting a sense of how we're at the very edge of going into a big discussion that can be hard for a lot of people to have, to sit with, to witness, to be part of. So I'm really grateful for those of you that came live. We had a lot of people sign up for this, but not everyone could be live. So even just feeling what it's like to be coming in to this conversation in real time. And my favorite way to start settling in is to look around the space you're in. So taking a break from the screen and literally looking at the environment you're sitting in. So you can get a sense of where you are, what it feels like, what it smells like, what the lighting is like, what's it like to really just physically settle into where you are right now. Because as you'll see as we go through this, and this is kind of the very beginning of this work in general, as you're orienting to the screen, to what I say, to what my co-hosts say, to what people here might say, you'll feel different rushes in your body, activation, pressure, energy, excitement, anger, fear, joy, agreement. All these different things emerge when we're working with these topics. So we want to start by really taking a break from the screen to realize I'm not there, I'm here. And what it feels like in your body to be here. Like really check that out. Looking around, especially looking for one thing in the room that's really pleasant for you. Something like a beautiful plant or the way the light's coming in the windows or a drawing someone gave you or a photo of someone you love. And really just take a moment to just sit on that with your eyes and scan your body. Notice how's your body feeling as you look at this. Specifically, look for your breath, your chest, your belly. Does something soften? Does breath get a little easier? How do your shoulders feel? Imagine if we started every political debate like this, where we're just pausing to first get a sense of where we are in the room. It's very important. And one reason that's so important is when you're talking about high charge, controversial things, your body feels as if those things are happening now. Even something you're 100% sure will happen, like let's say it's definitely going to happen in 3 months, it's going to happen, let's say. Is it happening now? That's the thing we're playing with because we're looking to get centered into ourselves when exploring high sensation topics. So we have capacity for when they do come. And that's a big part of somatic work. That's why I'm so happy to be merging these things together, right? Conversations about society and politics and collective triggers and fears and joys through the lens of somatics. Because somatics give us a way to be in our body when we're dealing with really big experiences and to be in our body when we're not dealing with them. We're talking about them and we're dealing with them. Those are two separate things. And everybody here gets to assess for themselves as we go through this event, what are you actually experiencing in real time? And what are you preparing for and expecting? Just to get a sense of that difference. Because that honors your experience, it doesn't deny your fear, it doesn't deny what may be coming, it doesn't deny any of that. It actually brings you into an embodied sense of what's actually happening now so I can get a little resourcing. So when the thing happens that I'm terrified of, I have more of me to go into that with. That's very important. So even notice that right now, again, as we settle in before we go into introductions and getting our intentions, just really feeling like I love letting my head just fall back on the chair. It's the simple things in life. It feels so good. It's like, it tells me I'm okay. And it actually does somatically. You can try it. You can let your head fall back. You can hold your head in your hands. Just holding the head for a couple seconds, it tells the animal body that it doesn't have to be vigilant and ready to fight. So it literally tells your nervous system, oh, I'm allowed to settle. I'm being held. Something's supporting me here. And it's an excellent technique to go to when you start to feel triggered and overwhelmed. Excellent, excellent technique. So just feel that for a couple seconds together, what that's like to really let the head be supported. Notice how your breath changes. Notice the places that were tense that are now softer. We want that. Softness means you have more capacity for big sensations that come up when we're talking about big things. And we'll keep reminding you that as we go through this session together. First thing I'm going to do is introduce myself and then my team and then my co-hosts. Okay. So I'm Luis Mojica. Some of you might already know me and follow my work. Some of you may be meeting me for the first time. I'm a nutritionist and I'm also a trauma therapist. And I work specifically with somatic experiencing, which is a form of somatic psychology that I was certified in. And it teaches you how to essentially experience life without dissociating. So, dissociating is when we completely take off and lose how our body feels. And I was walking around dissociated for most of my life, didn't even know it. So, I couldn't bear to have conversations that were uncomfortable because I was already filled with so much charge. So, the moment I started talking about things that were stressful, or even, which was really edgy for me, being honest when it came to disagreeing with people, it felt like an end to my life was coming. It felt like severe threat was going to happen to me. So, repression. I wouldn't speak. I would shut down. I'd be really small when I become invisible. And that's what most of us go through when we go into these kind of conversations. Somatics really helped me move through that because now I can feel the difference between this is a really intense conversation and my life is being threatened. Two different things. I can feel that difference. That's an important difference to learn, which I hope we get to teach you today. I'm going to introduce you to two members of my team and then two co-hosts. First one is Marika Malaya, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Marika.
Hi, everyone. I am the operations manager here at HLN, so basically means that I run the business end of things. In this meeting, if you want to chat with me, you can always ask questions about anything that we do at HLN and any of the content that you might hear today. So I'm really happy to see so many people came today.
And Evan Glenn Adams.
Hi, everyone. I'm Evan. I'm the admin manager and tech support here at HLN. And the same as Marika, if you want to send me a message, whether it's about HLN or anything tech related, or also anything content related, feel free to.
Thank you both. So if you go down to your screen, everybody, you see where it says chat, you can type in Evan or Marika at any point and chat. And it's a great service they provide because if you get overwhelmed, something annoys you, irritates you, you get triggered, you can even reach out and be like, I'm having a hard time with this. Can you give me some input? So feel free to reach out to them in real time if you need that. Um, I'm going to introduce you now to another team member and my co-host today, Camille Leek. Camille, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I am Camille. I am an assistant teacher and community manager here at HLN. I've had the opportunity to work with some of you. If you haven't had the opportunity to work with me, a little context about what I bring into this space is that in addition to being trained in somatic experiencing, my introduction into trauma healing work was actually through diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, and I chose to begin to explore the idea of trauma as it related to trauma being a form of marginalization we can experience at a individual, community, or generational level. And then, like Luis was describing, I also then begin to explore how the barrier to inclusion can be the perception of difference or disagreement being a life or death situation. And with conscious awareness of that, my body may be responding to somebody else or myself being different as a life or death situation. Can I attune to when that is or is not true? And when I can attune to when that isn't true, how does that impact the way I show up, the way I communicate with another person?
Thank you, Camille. And then we're very happy to be accompanied by a guest. I don't even know what to call you. There's so many things in my book. author, amazing human being, curiosity sibling, political commentator, Monica Guzman, if you want to introduce yourself. And it's Monica's birthday. She is celebrating her birthday with us. So let's give her some extra emojis, please. Go ahead, Monica.
I love Curiosity Sibling. I think that's my favorite one today. But yes, I'm senior fellow for public practice at Braver Angels. I know some of you are here through Braver Angels, and just so much welcome. I love bringing together these communities. I'm pretty obsessed with what it takes to remove whatever's in the way of our seeing each other for who we really are. And since getting to know Luis and this work, it's really deepened my own curiosity about that. And I wrote a book called I Never Thought of It That Way, with tips and tools about how to engage with folks across the political difference in particular. But it's become more and more true to me that the first place to aim curiosity is inward. What is going on in here? And it, just like Camille was saying, how does that affect everything that comes next and how I see the people around me? I was really, really excited to be here with you all.
Thank you, love. So happy you're here. So honored you're spending this time with us. So I want everyone to pause and just see what it's like to have heard our voices and see our faces and kind of check in with your body. Okay, because in a moment, I'm going to ask for some of your intentions. But for now, just really feeling like, okay, what's it like to be here as I'm hearing each person speak and I'm seeing the support I'm getting, and we're kind of starting to head into the direction of this work. Like, what's coming up for you? Some of you might feel like really settled, like, I'm ready. This is awesome. Some of you might be dreading this, even though you came, which is amazing. Some of you might be getting triggered and kind of skeptical and not really understanding things. Just see where you are with it. This is a mixed group. There's people here that have done lots of somatic work. There's people who never heard the term till today. So just be gracious with yourself around how much you understand, how much you don't, and what your capacity is, how much ability you have in this moment to go into what it is we're exploring. And know that it's being recorded, and we will have a free replay when this is over. So you'll have a lot of time to review and look over things if you need to. So the first thing I want to do is set an intention. And I'm actually going to ask Camille and Monica to follow my intention so you can all get a sense of how we're doing this. And then we're going to open up for about maybe 10 minutes or so your intentions, anyone that wants to share. But what I want to orient you toward is when I say your intention, think about when you come into a space talking about politics. And in this case, we're processing the election results somatically. The first thing I want to say out loud is not everybody here agrees with each other. Some people are processing the election and they're celebrating. Some of you here are celebrating, you're happy. Some of you are terrified. Some of you are angry. Some of you are indifferent. So there's a lot of different emotions, even in response to the election. This is like a bipartisan and also nonpartisan and every other party you could imagine confluence of people. So not everyone here is on the same page, which is very important to say at the top. So you can just kind of feel into that and know that's what's happening, and that's what we're inviting. That's actually what I like. I like a lot of diversity of thought. So feeling into that first to know that. And that being said, the goal here is not to leave believing a certain thing about a certain party or candidate. That's not the purpose of this at all. The purpose of this entire 2-hour service that we're bringing you for free, the reason we do this for free, is to introduce to you how you can process big things in the world, especially things you don't have direct control over, within your body, instead of thinking I have to go out there and change it, which you might as well. That's totally fine. In addition to that, what does my body need? How do I go into discussions around difference, like what Camille was talking about, with my body in mind? Right? And that's part of my intention here, is to stretch this out. I'm going to be teaching you some techniques and practices, but stretch out that moment between I hear something that bothers me and then a feeling emerges. And then what do I do with that? Like, I want to stretch that out for all of us. That's my intention and my goal here. So even just feeling into that yourselves, assessing what is your ability and what is your experience with stretching out that reaction time between I heard something that bothered me, felt the sensation of I'm bothered, and then had a reaction. And in the trauma world, especially the somatic therapy world, the reactions are what we call stress response or trauma response. And those words turn people off sometimes because it sounds like really overreactive to say you had a trauma response because you were arguing with somebody. But all trauma is an adrenaline response. That's all it is, right? The events can be different for everybody. But when someone's talking about a traumatic experience, they're talking about an experience where so much adrenaline was made that it changed the biochemistry of your being. Your blood pressure went up, your muscles got really tense, your brain is unable to be open and peripheral and interested and curious. It goes to one narrow idea of survival or truth, right? One truth. Your whole physiology changes in like 30 seconds. It's incredible. So when someone's traumatized, their body's stuck in that biology. The adrenals are constantly working overtime and your physiology is completely shifted. It's not able to rest. You can't feel the seat you're on because your animal body is just primed for survival. As I'm saying that, a lot of you are knowing, you're like, yep, that makes sense. Been there. That's been my life story, right? For some of you. Others, you might be like, oh, that's horrible. I never experienced that. So even see where you're resonating with that definition and understanding. Because stress response and trauma response, same thing. The only difference is when you're stressed out and you have a stress response, your body can metabolize it. When you're traumatized, it's so much adrenaline, so much metabolic waste, even like it's a biological experience. You can't metabolize it. So you're stuck in that level of stress constantly. It becomes chronic. This is what creates anxiety, thyroiditis, insomnia, bowel issues, you name it. And as a nutritionist, that's how I started. I started working with people that had essentially, let's say, the expressions from a lifetime of trauma. They had the biological expressions, the autoimmune conditions, the chronic illness. That's who was coming into my office. And I could give people a script of what to eat. Like I was good with that. And they were good with taking it for the first 6 weeks, 3 months, massive transformations, things would shift. And then something always bounced back. And I'm like, what's the thing that's bouncing back? You know, a very small amount of people, nope, no bounce back. They just stayed on the script for years. They're to this day, they're fine. Other people, it wouldn't stick. The people that it wouldn't stick had chronic stress in their lives or some kind of unprocessed, unconscious trauma they were carrying, and they were using food to remediate that biology. So I started to understand, oh, trauma is biochemical. It's not just this event. I used to think it was all about the event. Like someone that went to war was traumatized, someone that did bad in school wasn't. I was like, nope. You know, I had a sense of almost like hierarchy of what constituted it. But then when I started studying somatic psychology, it completely it correlated beautifully with biochemistry and nutrition that I learned and studied as a nutritionist. Because even in nutrition, you learn how food affects the adrenals. And then with somatic psychology, you learn how events affect the adrenals. So all of it comes down to these two little glands, the adrenals, and they're right in your lower back, right above your kidneys. Those glands, depending on how stimulated they are, tell your body if you're safe or not. And that's the trick. That's what makes us all lose our minds when we're having these conversations because our adrenals fire up and the animal body has not evolved long enough to tell the difference between there's an actual fire in the room or it feels like there's a fire in the room. We don't know the difference. So we lose all sense of ground. We lose all sense of relative safety and privilege. We lose all sense of our resources, like what's supporting us. And we feel like our lives are at stake, right? So I'm giving you that background for those of you that are new around like, why would a trauma therapist and a nutritionist be talking about these issues? There's nothing, to me, they're this exact same issue. Something in the environment is causing a stress response in my body. And the more I'm in that stress response, the less I'm able to feel safe, get sleep, recover, eat well, connect to people. Your entire life is disturbed by that when your insides, right, your inner biochemistry is activated. So even if there's something in the world that's absolutely horrible and you want to change it, and you definitely should, you still have to have your body in mind if you want to be intact while you're doing it. If you want to take care of yourself, if you want to sleep, if you want to eat well, if you want to treat people good. And I've come to learn, I'm very happy to say, you can do both. You can respond to injustice and things that bother you and things you want to change in the world while honoring your body and your biology. They can both come together. You don't have to leave one for the other. So my intention is you leave here really getting that, not even being able to do it, but just understanding it and practicing some of the techniques I teach you here. And I am going to make sure before we go into the whole thing, we're going to have Camille and Monica share their intentions. I'm also going to ask Mary Beth Stibbins to come off mute just to introduce Braver Angels because they're an amazing resource for what we're talking about here if you're not already part of it. So, Camille, do you want to share your intentions here?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm choosing to join as a teacher in the sense of if it's helpful at all to share how I've not just processed the most recent election, but the last couple of elections and what I have found useful in navigating those as a human being, but also as a woman, someone who's Black, a mother, Muslim, autistic, should that be helpful? But I'm also joining because I'm curious. I'm curious to hear what in this realm, what people are experiencing and what's present for you. Because it's one thing to check out cable news or to surf the internet, but this feels different in some respect. And so I'm curious to see what comes up here.
And just pause to land, each new person that speaks, just kind of notice, oh, how did I feel that? How did I receive that? Where do I connect to that? Just give that a moment. I really appreciate that distinction of like, what are we used to seeing on the internet, on cable, on the radio, and how is this very different? Just even start to notice that already. Okay. Monica, what would you like to share with your intention?
Yeah, so like Camille, I'm here super curious, really eager to soak up what people are willing to share about all these universes of experiences and emotions and sensations and all of that. It's not a language I'm used to talking about all the way through or talking in all the way through, and I'm really excited about it. At Braver Angels, I have a podcast called A Braver Way, and I bring that up because in our last episode, it was an Ask Me Anything episode. And just after the election, we asked folks to send us their deep down honest questions about how we bridge the divide from here. And we got hundreds of questions. And I read each and every one of them. Some of them brought me to tears. And they were from conservatives, they were from liberals, they were from libertarians, they were from independents, people who would call themselves politically homeless, which is an interesting term. And one of the many impressions I got from going through that, I remember being on a flight actually, many, many, many feet into the air. And as I was kind of crying with some of the pain I was feeling, some of the frustration, some of the hurt from people breaking bonds around politics, everything. One of the impressions I got was it feels to me like the folks who wrote these long reflections don't have a lot of places in their lives to work through this and exercise this in this curious way. What are your questions? What's behind what you want to know? It felt like it was a fairly unique even opportunity for a lot of people, and it made me think, I want people to feel less alone in these conversations. I want people to feel like maybe it's not so taboo to kind of move inside out and say, here's where I'm confused, here's where I'm hurt, here's where I don't really know what to do, here's where relationally I'm stuck, but I'm trying. And boy, that was interesting and really cool to go through. And so again, it left me so curious and so eager to be in and help co-create spaces where people can just be real about this stuff. Just be real. But be around enough folks who might see it differently, that we're not just getting the same things reflected back to each other. That there's something else going on. There's an acceptance and a challenge, and there's a tell me what you mean, and there's all that. And because I've found in my experience that can be so illuminating, that can be so transformative and so interesting to see your own sensations and thoughts from another angle, and then suddenly there's a reframe there that you could choose. And that's given me a lot of power, not just in political things, but in everything. So I love it. I love being around people who can be real. And I think that these tools give us a way into that a lot of other spaces just don't offer. So yes, so my intention, hoping that we can feel a little less alone and like we can be a little more honest out there. Honest. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? I want a more honest world that can see itself. That's what I want.
Beautiful. Thank you, Monica. And again, just kind of feeling that in your bodies. We're a big fan of emojis. It's a really great way virtually to track a room because when you're live, you hear people like they clap or they laugh, they take a breath. You get to track them. So if you go to where it says reactions, there's like endless emojis you can play with. Whenever someone says anything and you want to have a reaction, just do it. Don't think you have to kind of wait. If you're angry, if you're happy, you're sad, like whatever it is, just kind of like let it out. It's a really great way for you to release something, and it's great for us to kind of track how's someone feeling or how's the group feeling about what we're talking about. So even notice as you see the emojis, even though we're virtual, you can start to feel a sense of a weaving, like a back and forth, which is really nice because everyone doing this with me, we're highly relational creatures. We love being in conversation. So even though we're doing a lot of talking at you, I want this to be talking with you. And that's one way we can keep that conversation going. I'm going to ask Mary Beth Stibbins to give a brief introduction just to Braver Angels for anyone that doesn't know about them, because the resource is incredible. And maybe you can send Evan a link and he'll put the link in the chat for people to check out. And then we're going to dive in. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yes, so Braver Angels is a national nonprofit grassroots organization that was formed in 2016. And what we do is create space and invite groups of people who are having trouble getting along, polarized, to get to know one another as human beings beyond the stereotypes, and to hear the life stories and personal experiences that have shaped people's views, to build some trust and to be able to ask sincere questions of curiosity to understand one another better and find common ground where it exists. We do this through workshops. We have skills workshops. We have discussion workshops and many other resources. And we're really excited to get to partner with Holistic Life Navigation. So there's the overview.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Beth. Evan will put a link in the chat in a moment. But again, really, really brilliant organization. I cannot suggest them enough. It's really, really rare to find a place with the kind of integrity they have to hold all views openly, like really, really play with free speech. And what interests me about free speech is you can't have it, in my opinion, without somatics. Because the whole point of free speech is so you can say something controversial. It's not so you can agree. But we have to remember controversy means it goes against what is the norm, whether it's like culturally, like the majority agrees on something and a small minority disagrees, there's controversy or they're subversive, right? Or the norm in our individual lives, like something I've always known to be true, someone saying something that's so opposite of that. That's what controversy is, okay? So controversy doesn't always equal harm. It just means there's a difference. And physically, something happens inside of us when we are interacting with controversy. And this is similar to what Camille was bringing in earlier. And if we think about these bodies we have, whether we like it or not, they're animals. They're biological animal bodies. And so they have deep, deep, deep historical instincts for how to survive. And one of those instincts is to question difference. Not to trust difference, but to question difference, to wonder, is that person, is that animal, is that tree going to kill me, follow me, yell at me? Like always looking for survival and thinking of survival and thinking this could be a potential threat. Now, the more adrenaline in your system, the more you perceive life as a threat. It's incredible. And I saw this as a nutritionist. I see it every week as a nutritionist. When people eat in a way where their blood sugar stabilize, their adrenaline levels come down, and they suddenly start to feel more hopeful. And we can all think of like being hangry, being like really irritable, kind of like can't really think straight, feel really overwhelmed. Then you eat something and you feel settled. That's a shift with your blood sugar and your adrenaline. It's a very fast change. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 90 minutes, somewhere in between there. The entire biochemistry of your brain changes because of your glucose levels and your adrenaline levels. Really important stuff. Because the more adrenaline, the more I feel threatened, right? So we have this instinct when we're feeling threatened to assess the threat. And when we're talking to someone who thinks different than us, especially when their belief system literally opposes my lifestyle, there's an understandable instinct this person isn't safe. It feels like there's danger. And this is what somatics is so brilliant at doing when you practice over time. You start to assess the difference of, am I getting triggered or am I actually unsafe here? And what I've come to learn over the years is like 90% of the time I'm getting triggered. And it's really incredible to learn that. And you can't always know. You know, even the more and more you practice, you can know in that moment. So if you're ever confused, don't question your safety. Like, go get safe. Like, go away, lock your door, leave, drive away, whatever the situation is, hang up the phone, whatever it is. And then even afterwards, you can do the practices to realize, oh, is that triggering something? Or am I actually in danger with this individual? And this is the piece I want to kind of start to open with. In a moment, I'm going to go into some intentions from everyone as well, but I just want to start getting you kind of introduced to somatics in this language so that I can just go into it without always explaining it, right? We're really working with understanding when I have that adrenal response, which happens like a nanosecond. It's not, doesn't take years, it's like seconds. In response to controversy, my physical being feels endangered. It's supposed to be. That's how we're designed. And the moment I feel endangered, I look for the source of danger. And in this case, it's the person I'm in front of. It's the person on the TV. It's the group of people who voted for this person or the group of people that believe this. So instantly, naturally, by design, I start to other that person and separate myself from them for security. Whether or not I've assessed my safety, the instantaneous thing is like get away from this person or change them. It's like one or the other, right? And this is where it gets really interesting because what Monica was saying about differences, different people colliding, coming together, the way it works for trauma renegotiation, trauma recovery, and through a somatic lens is something called the counter vortex. So an individual, let's say that escaped a horrible car accident, they survived a horrible car accident, and 10 years later, they still can't get in a car. This person has not been able to access the counter vortex, which means the opposite of what happened. So what they're still accessing in their body is cars equal danger, possible death, threat. So every time they think about driving, every time they get in the car, every time they see a car even, the body immediately lights up because it has associated that experience now with imminent threat, right? When someone can find the counter vortex, which means I'm sitting in a car and nothing has happened yet. I'm sitting in the car and oh, a bird just flew by. Or I'm sitting on my couch, I'm not even at the car. Oh, how nice does it feel to be on this couch? That person starts creating what's called pendulation, which means the body goes from this one absolute truth to something else that's actually different from that truth. So I'm unsafe becomes the couch is actually really comfortable. And then something starts to alchemize. You literally have a shift in how the adrenals are responding to your life around you. Okay. So this inner pendulation is natural. Every animal body can do it. Animals in nature do it like that. That's one reason why they can live under such stressful conditions because they pendulate a lot. And humans, I mean, come on, think of our ancestors. Think of what they went through. And yes, they probably emerged with lots of issues that they weren't able to work with in their timeline because they didn't have all these resources we had. But they were able to function mostly and survive and laugh and make love and be beautiful people at times, even if they were doing horrible things, right? That's because that inner pendulation we're all gifted with. What's fascinating about media, especially social media, is we have more of an echo chamber because of the algorithm. So we have less invitation to pendulate. Meaning the vortex, the thing that stresses us out, is what we keep seeing. Even if it's true, I'm not here to say what you're seeing is untrue or true. That's not my interest here. It's if I see something that stresses me out and my algorithm attaches to that, I'm just seeing endless echoes of the same sentiment or experience that stresses me out, right? Nothing's interrupting that to give me a counter vortex. So here we are together live, those of you that are live. Notice right now what it's like to just take a break and look, literally turn your face away from the screen. This would be a counter vortex. So you're looking away from the screen and track your face, your throat, your chest, your belly. Really notice if those places settle when you look away, if they amp up, if they tense. Like what happens when you just take a break from the screen, which can be very stimulating, and you look in your environment. Maybe you look around for that lovely thing we saw earlier, something in the room you like. Just to feel that little break. right? The interruption is what we're looking for, not the denial, not the ignoring, interrupting. Because when I'm just focused on the vortex, the thing that's stressing me out, my body cannot pendulate because it's only taking in one thing. And when we go into fears, especially political, collective, global fears about situations, we go into what's called co-dysregulation, where people are saying right back to us the very thing we fear the most, and we're all agreeing and we're building our stress hormones together. Now, there's a difference between this is real, let's connect, it feels nice to connect over something that scares me, and okay, we agreed, now let's find something here that settles us, right, to get our resourcing. There's a difference in that swing. That swing doesn't tend to happen online. It's rare you're going to find someone in your feed, in your inbox, even in your group of friends, unless you've like consciously looked for thought diversity, you're not going to get that easily. You're going to get a lot of responses of people that agree with you because we tend to put ourselves around with people we feel safe with. And for a lot of us, safety means agreeing, right? That's not bad. I'm just saying, just to get a sense of this. If I feel safe with you, I agree with you. When I say, I like that person so much, we had so much in common. It's right there. We had so much in common. What about I love that person so much and we don't have anything in common? Like how easy is that for you? How often does that happen? How much does that make up your friendship circles? So I'm giving you this somatic sense as we go into this so we can understand and so you can form an intention more. Think about your life right now. Think about how you're processing the election. And what's excellent here is if your candidate won and you're happy, imagine if he didn't win. What would that have felt like for you? Those of you whose candidate didn't win, how did that feel? Like feel that thing in your body and just see what that's like to place where it lives. Because we think these things, we don't notice that we're feeling them. We think I'm so disappointed. We think I'm so scared. We think I'm going to lose my rights. All these thoughts. What are we feeling around that? Like, how does that actually settle into your body? And again, I'm speaking to both sides. I've heard both sides say the same thing, regardless of who is going to win. If this person wins, this horrible thing's going to happen. If this person wins, this horrible thing's going to happen. Whether they're right or not, again, it's not about right or wrong. How am I holding that in my body? So take a moment to feel that and take your hand and like place it where you feel that. Place it where you feel the tension, where you feel the pressure. I want you to get to know what stress response feels like, because this is part one if you want to learn how to do this work. Where does my physical body hold the fear of what's to come based on who won the election? And again, if your candidate won, imagine if he didn't, and put your hand there. And so see what it's like just to even locate that it has a place in your body. There's a spot that lives in you that does something. There's a tension, there's a sensation, a pressure. There's like a physicality to it. That's really important. That's the place you want to tend to first. Like when Monica says it starts inside, we want to first go, what is this about? What's the story about this? What have I experienced in my life that initiates the fear of the future? Do I even notice this place lives in me? When we get into co-dysregulation because people around us are also feeling this thing, but we're not presencing this thing in us keeps building to the point where our bodies can't handle it anymore. And then we start having the physiological responses. This is where we turn to food, turn to drugs, turn to alcohol, turn to Instagram, social media, overworking. We turn to something to try to numb out from this pain that just keeps growing, because everywhere we look, we just keep getting a reflection of our own fear, right? That doesn't resource us to actually have mobility and agency to respond to something that isn't working for us collectively or even in our lives. So those of you that identify or relate to being activists or love activism, it's like, how do I do this in a way where I'm considering my body, where I'm bringing as much justice and kindness to my body as I want to bring to the world? Is there a reflection there, or is there an incongruency? Because anyone that hasn't done it somatically knows how the burnout is. It's not fun. Camille, what would you add to that?
I would, even outside of adding something, I would invite everyone to pause and take stock of what you've experienced so far, just in listening to the introductions and what Louisa shared right now. Some of you may be feeling like, oh, this feels really settling. This is so different. I'm really liking being in this. Some of you may notice there's a part of you that is so fucking upset that it feels like this is a waste of time, or like, what are you talking about? The world is exploding and we're dismissing the reality. Whatever is present for you gets to be present. I'm just going to invite you first to pause and witness that. Take stock of that. How is my body responding right now in this moment to what people have said?
And let's take that a step further. Why don't you DM Camille and let her know, like, what is it that you're holding? And she'll speak it anonymously so we can hear what some people are feeling here, what's going on.
What if you can't locate a feeling in your body and kind of numb, feeling calm and settled, safe and relieved? I don't want to make space for people who want to take away my rights and child to feel safe right now. It's settling and calming not to be alone with this. Anticipation. I'm activated and hopeful. My shoulders are collapsing like they need to shrink and shield. Aches and pains. Discomfort in my chest. Detachment. Somewhat shut down and weary, but also curious and activated. Some tension in my jaw. Feel heartbroken. So much tension in my heart. Shaky and turmoil in my tummy. Some fear about even speaking this stuff out loud. I'm quietly panicking. Relaxed and warm. Grateful for the pause. My body needed it.
Let's actually pause there. So what would be great is anyone that has access to a pillow to get that. If you don't, you can bunch up a jacket or a sweater. If you can't do that, use your hands. And what we're going to do is take the hands, take a pillow, jacket, sweater, whatever it is, and put it over your belly, chest area, and give it a little pressure. Now, we all did this as kids, and some of you haven't done this since then. But see what it's like. Just really track, especially those places that you're all expressing to Camille, like the tension, the silently panicking, the sadness, the fear, the skepticism, the I can't feel anything, whatever that is, the joy, like whatever it is. See what it's like to just press into that a little bit. Give those sensations a little support. This pressure at the front part of the body, it's really helpful for our nervous systems. It helps the nervous system from just amping up. It helps us actually settle into what the sensation is. So in the pause of locating where you feel said thing, whatever it is, just see what it's like to give that little pressure. Just give it a moment. Just to see how does the sensation respond to the pressure. And there's no right way. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets bigger, sometimes it goes away. Just see what it does. Yeah, sometimes you'll find movement emerge. Sometimes a yawn will emerge. Breath could change. Just really notice. A couple more seconds. Now, in addition to this, using your eyes, look around the room again and just locate one thing you really love, especially while you're holding the pillow, giving yourself some pressure, and feel where that thing lives in your body. Like when I look at the plant, like where do I feel a sense of ease as I look at this plant or whatever it is you're looking at? Right? So there's a place of stress in you, you're giving it some pressure, and now you're looking for the opposite. Think about what I said, counter vortex. Where is there another experience possible? So panic and delight when I look out the window. And share that with Camille. Where do you feel the other thing as you hold this part of you and as you look around the room you're in a little bit?
In the sky, My face relaxes. More agency to move forward. Love in my heart, and tingling in my face. Feeling ease in my face, a gentle swaying in the hips. A warm sensation envelops me. Solid, warmth in my heart. Joy is my chest expanding. Stress is it squeezing. My arms stretch up. Contentment, a warmth expanding around my heart.
And take one or two more.
Easier breath and teariness in the eyes.
So right now we're getting a beautiful real-time understanding, or at least seeing, of what a counter vortex is. Okay. So I felt the stress of the situation. I noticed where it lives in me. I touch into it. Some of you in that moment, just the touching into it, that shifted. Others, it stayed there, but either way, you were with it. And now, additionally, I look for something in the room that's pleasant. This isn't to trick you. What this is doing is showing your body the difference between now and the future. That's a really important difference. This is when we start to get that understanding over time of that separation of I'm uncomfortable, I'm triggered, I'm annoyed, I don't like this, and I'm unsafe. Those are really important distinctions. And I would say when I grew up, we like really had to learn those things in school. And that's kind of fallen by the wayside for a lot of people I've spoken with, especially with being online, because you're naturally disembodied online, meaning your body's not there. Like we're looking at a screen and we very quickly lose ourselves. Think of it in this session, it might already happen to you. You might have lost yourself because you're looking at the screen. So when you lose your body, your felt sense while you're looking at the screen, and the screen is filled with lots of controversial big things, you don't learn that sense of how do I feel throughout the controversy. And I hate to be like, when I was growing up, like I can't believe I'm even old enough to say that. But when I was growing up, I was constantly facing controversy. Like it's a shock to see how it's so easy to find bubbles of people where you can be kind of removed from something you don't want to hear. That was so not the ability I had growing up. The radio was controversial, the news was controversial, my classroom every day was controversial. So I was constantly feeling the stress of being in situations where people didn't like me because of my sexuality or my body or the family I came from, right? Or people did because of those things. It'd be so different depending on what situation I was in. But I'm so grateful I got to develop in that visceral feeling of being around controversy and learning the difference between I'm actually safe here or I'm not. So when we're doing this practice here, you're noticing this is where I hold the fear of what's coming. This is where I hold the belief of what I've been told or what I believe independently. This is where I hold animosity toward people that think this way or vote this way. That's where I hold it. And what's actually happening right now. And see what that's like for you to hear. Does that somehow equal denial for you? You know, does that equal not being validated? Does it equal pleasure? Like what a relief to learn these differences? Just get a sense of how you track that as I say it. In a moment, I'm going to ask Camille and Monica to like dive into that a little more with me. But just that difference of this is where I hold the fear of the future, and this is where I am right now. And what's it like to just honor that both of those are real? Like my fear of the future is real. There it is. And this softening in my shoulders is actually what it's like to be in my present moment. How could those two things, knowing those two things, benefit you and the world around you? I want to start with Camille because she teaches this with me all the time. So take it from here a little bit. Tell us what you think around that.
So for me, around that, I want to acknowledge that for many of us, the charge, the activation that comes up when we're thinking about that potential future threat, we may not want to release that charge. We may not want to release that activation, that constriction, that hypervigilance, because it feels like if we attune to the present moment, now I'm becoming complacent and something bad will definitely happen. So I first just want to acknowledge that it feels like our safety is dependent on an extreme form of hypervigilance, because if I don't, then that thing I'm afraid of happening is definitely going to happen. And even just notice what it's like to be with acknowledging that. And what I would offer is, first, even outside the realm of politics, see if the body generally prefers to be in a hypervigilant state. And this is really, really common, because at some point for many of us, maybe we experienced some sort of violation, something bad happened. And now the body has said, oh, I never want that to happen again. I know the way not to let that happen again. I'll always be on guard for it to happen. And we can absolutely do that. But it is fucking exhausting. And maybe the more professional word I'll use is, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So the example I like to give in terms of how we navigate that reality is my experience with racism. So yes, racism is real. I've experienced it. My children more than likely will experience it, and so on. And because of the realities of racism, and because I live in a predominantly white neighborhood, it is very possible that I will one day be stopped by police officers or neighbors who don't know me, and I will be questioned as to why I'm in this neighborhood. And because of that reality, I do choose to carry my ID with me when I walk through my neighborhood. But while I'm walking through my neighborhood, am I attuning to whether or not this neighbor is going to come up and question me? Or, oh no, I'm seeing a police officer coming down the street. They're probably coming from me. No. I'm choosing instead to attune to, the sky is so blue. I hadn't noticed it was so blue. Or right now we're in that beginning of winters and the air just feels so crisp and clear. And I really like that. Or if I'm walking with my daughter, Khadijah, and she's in her carrier, just feeling her squirm on my chest. So in that moment, I'm able to hold the reality. Yes, racism exists, and it is possible I will be questioned as to why I'm in this neighborhood. But I'm also able to hold the reality of what I'm experiencing in that moment. And because I'm holding what I'm experiencing in that moment, should I actually end up encountering threat in the form of being questioned why I'm there, I now have the resourcing, the energy to actually respond to it, because I haven't expanded all that energy into being perpetually scared that it is going to happen. So this is a really nuanced way of being with this reality, in that it's not about saying racism doesn't exist, so I don't have to prepare for it, and it's not about saying, yep, this is definitely going to happen, so you always got to be ready so you don't have to get ready. What we want to begin to do is explore that ability to hold both. So I gave that example within the context of racism, and some of you might be thinking, okay, but what is that? How do you apply that to how you're processing the election? So, for example, I did not vote for Donald Trump. Woke up the next day, found out he won, and there was this immediate rush of just like, yeah, rush. It's energy. It was hot, and the word that came up for me was I was livid that he won. Okay. I get to be with that livid sensation. And as I was with that sensation, I got curious about like, what was it that my body was attuning to? And as you can see, like my body's going forward. It was this future threat. It's like what it means, where it's going. And there were some other things that were interwoven in there too. But to support me in being with that, I also supported my body in coming back to right now. Yes, he won the election. And as of right now, nothing about my life has changed. Can I attune to that right now in this moment, nothing has changed? And in attuning to that, I can hold this part of me that's very, very livid about what might happen. But I'm also able now to access my agency. That is, instead of being afraid about what might happen, I can begin to expand my ability to notice what's in my agency right now. What choices might I need to make right now about what I am experiencing to respond? So if I'm afraid that this may mean the fall of democracy, there's actually nothing for me to respond to because the fall of democracy hasn't happened yet. But if I come back to what I'm experiencing right now, there might be steps I want to take. Do I want to get involved in local elections? Do I want to be aware about not just with voting with my ballot, but voting with my dollar? Do I want to change the businesses and organizations I'm supporting? So I shared this sort of maze, I guess I know it's not the most linear of paths, to illustrate that that charge we feel when we're tuning to an anticipated future threat, it feels really supportive. It feels really, that hypervigilance feels like it's keeping us safe. But in actuality, it puts us in a paralyzing state because the only thing worse than an actual threat is a future threat because there's nothing for us to respond to. But if I can come back to what I'm experiencing right now, it actually allows me the ability to mobilize with congruent action. I'll pause there because I know that was a lot.
This is great. So notice there's a couple things here to learn from. First, just notice how when you're witnessing Camille doing these things individually in her life day to day, as well as with collective, potential changes and actual collective changes, there's this flexible nervous system. That's what I want everyone to really get from that. She's not getting stuck in one place, right? She's not getting stuck in denial, and she's not getting stuck in attuning to the things she's afraid of. She floats. It's like, there's my fear, got it. Oh, and there's the sky, got it, right? That's important for us to get because when I learned that about somatic psychology, that pendulation, being able to be with the whole picture, not just one or the other, actually cured people of PTSD. I was like, light bulb moment. Like, this is the way to not spiritually or cognitively bypass things, right? Cognitive bypassing means like I'm talking myself out of it. I'm not actually feeling how I really feel. Right? Spiritual bypassing, we make up, oh, we're all going to be okay. Who cares anyway? Ignoring how your feelings are and how you're, and even the reality outside of you. Pendulation and being able to orient to vortex and counter vortex means nothing gets lost. So you don't lose the reality of the blue sky and I'm safe right now. And you don't lose the reality of I don't like this and I want to do something about it. It's like you get to be with all the realities, which is actually more practical than one or the other. If I'm just orienting to the counter vortex, I'm in denial of my current experience. And if I'm only looking at what I love about my current experience, I'm in denial of the things that really hurt me or bother me. Right. So the more like practical, even like not spiritual way is the counter vortex and the vortex and pendulating between the two. It's like super practical. So I'm wanting everyone to first get that for a minute, just to feel that the intention here is not to live just solely in one or the other, but swing between the two. And one way we learn about like when is it time to swing? Like how long do you know? It's different for each person, but when you start feeling like I'm losing my center, I can't eat, I'm so upset, having a hard time sleeping, that is your signal that you're focused on the vortex of stress too much. That's your signal, right? You want to be able to look at the opposite reality as well. That's also still a reality and feel how it settles you. So, like Camille says, it gives you the resourcing to move forward. This is why, for me, this conversation is nonpartisan. Because if you're in America and you really like democracy and you have to get with change. Like someone every 4 years wins and someone's upset about it. There's a big group that is hurt. There's a big group that's celebrating. That has never changed my entire lifetime. The only thing that's changed is our inability to be with controversy. That's getting a little less. We're losing the threshold, like the threshold for controversy getting a little lower. So when someone wins, we get a little more divided each time. But we've always lived in a country where, wow, I'm really pissed. I can't believe people voted for him. I can't believe people would even vote for her. Like that's always going to be here. So learning how to swing between these two is learning how to be with the reality of things are out of my control. How do I settle into my body to keep my life and my relationship stable as we navigate potential chaos, sometimes disorder, and sometimes disappointment that feels like chaos and disorder. Sometimes we're more disappointed than we're actually actively affected by something. Other times we're actively affected by something. So it's so individual based on the state you're in, your identity, what you've been through, what you care about. It is so individual, right? The person I wanted didn't even win. So I didn't wake up with any feeling. I wasn't upset. I wasn't ecstatic. I was going, right? So it's really important to understand is I'm also saying that just transparently here, that we're not just a panel of people that all really wanted one person to win. We all have different political beliefs here. I'm not a government person. I never have been. So I've never felt seen by the left, right? I also don't feel seen by the right. So I've always called myself purple because I love parts of the Conservative Party. I love parts of the Democratic Party, but I don't really fit into either of them. They don't really represent me. I've always been a local person. I've always been really interested in my community. I've been interested in state law. I've been really interested in how do I affect where I live, like true, like a relational container at a local governmental level. That's what always lights me up. I don't think I'm ever going to see a country like that in my lifetime, but I love that. That's how I live my life. So I've been out of the tethers of left or right or who's going to preside for a very long time. I don't even really attune to that as much as I'm more attuned to the relational sphere where I am. So I'm just giving you that input too, that for me, I'm a little removed from being really too worried about who wins. But there's been moments in my life where I was really like crushed that the person I wanted didn't win, right? When I felt seen by somebody, which has been very rare. And so I know that feeling. I know that feeling of being just heartbroken. And then, like Camille said, the flood of what's going to happen entering my mind and my body. And because it hasn't happened yet, there's nothing to respond to. So biochemically, it's just a flood. It's just straight up adrenaline. And there's nothing to respond to. When there's a fire in the corner, the adrenaline rushes so I can run out the room or grab water and put it out. There's an action because it's right there. When it's expected threats and then coming down the line, whether it does or not, again, it's not about real or not real, it's just it hasn't happened yet. I'm just holding the adrenaline until it does. And a lot of my dearest friends, I've seen many different iterations of this every 4 years, hold that. And the thing that they thought was going to happen didn't even happen, right? Some it did, and they lived through it and they're doing fine. But some it didn't happen. So it's really about how am I resourcing myself until I'm actually dealing with the experience? How am I resourcing myself as I deal with changing the experience, with trying to shift something that could come or is coming? Monica, where do you go with this with all your work? How are you putting this together?
So many interesting places to go. I was thinking about, I forget if it was you or Camille using the language of preparation. When there's future threat, we want to prepare. And I was talking to my daughter the other day about how neat it is that you can kind of like close your eyes and imagine the taste of ketchup. You know, we were practicing that together. You can just like taste ketchup. It's nowhere near you. You can taste it. You can create that sensation. You can create all kinds of sensations, like what it's like to kind of be on a beach if you've been on a beach, or all kinds of things. The mind is so powerful that I think the thing I'm working on right now is don't let preparation become creation. Don't let preparation for the fear become creation of the nightmare in your moment right now, as if it is happening right now. Because there is a sense, and of so many folks I've talked to across the political divide, I resonate with this, that when fear is so effective as a mobilizer in particular, it's such a, once you're in fear, it's difficult to process it and let it go. It's such a, it immediately causes this reaction, and it's such a strong mobilizer because the mind, when under threat or when thinking about threat, is of course going into survival mode. And so it's going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I need to do? How do I get out of this? What do I do? And that becomes the most important thing. A lot more important than being where you are, a lot more important than paying attention to your kids because you're reading this article on the phone, which has happened to me a lot. And this threat becomes real. I can imagine these things that I'm afraid will happen happening. and my body is responding to it right now. And my daughter's trying to tell me about the dream she had last night. And it's difficult to follow her kind of convoluted logic. And here I am all of a sudden thinking about that article I just read. And that fire is now in my mind, and I can't listen to my daughter. She's trying to connect with me. And there's just there's so many ways in which what Camille was saying, it feels like we have almost a duty to our values. Fears are often it's responding to a threat to the things we care about, the things we value. So in order to really be committed to the things we value, we better make sure we're thinking about that threat and make sure we're preparing and make sure we're preparing. But so easily that preparation becomes projection. It becomes creation. And you're in that tight space. And then the bad things haven't actually happened yet, but they've already haunted you. They're already haunting you. And there's something, and as someone to whom this has happened, so disempowering in that. And we've used the word agency, and like what can happen when you can pendulate. You don't invalidate your own fear. The fear is there. The fear is there, and it does require attention sometimes, of course. And we can prepare, we can be vigilant. There's so many other things that can require attention and that can bring us joy and happiness right now. And this is sort of the thing. I also wanted to say that I was thinking about hope too, as we're thinking about fear. We do have folks who voted all different ways in the room with us. And I was thinking about my good friend Travis, who voted for the winner and talked to me about the intense hope he feels. So much excitement about this administration. And it wasn't something I had heard. It's not something I share innately. But hearing him, I got curious, and I realized that he was hesitant even to share his hope with me, he said, because he's just so conscious that the gaps are so large between people's experiences and sensations around things like an election, that while he said he wishes he could share his hope with people, he's just so afraid that it's almost impossible to. And I thought of that conversation because fear and hope both seem like these things that, let's say that you're talking to somebody who might agree with you, might not agree with you. You're actually not sure. The election comes up. And this has happened to me. Maybe this has happened to many of you. Maybe you talk about something you're hopeful about. Maybe you talk about something you're afraid of. And there's like this nervousness. What if this other person doesn't share your hope? What if they don't share your fear? And that's one of the places where I can feel my body be disappointed if, oh, darn it, this person doesn't share that hope or doesn't share that fear. And then I need to remind myself, so that fear is still mine. That hope is still mine. What leads me to put into this other person the reality of my experience or my sensations and feelings and thoughts about the election? What is causing that? And then I just try to stay grounded, and I go, okay, well, whether they share my level of fear or hope, can I just be honest about mine anyway? Can I stay true to mine anyway? This also comes up. I was telling you all that these questions came into our podcast, and a lot of them were about how people have treated each other's fears. Whether there's one woman who said that her sons think of her as racist and fascist because of the way that she voted. And, she has fears kind of going the other way, but her sons have no interest in that. They kind of see her as a manifestation of the things they're afraid of. And where to begin to be seen in the way she wants to be seen, or to be seen in the way she believes she is, which is not those fear-based things she's hearing, but something else. That break can be so very painful. And I think one thing that has become really important to me in the wake of the election, as I've observed and talked to folks, is, can we find a way to to receive people's fears and hopes as, and Luis, you've used this language before, somewhat sacred, somewhat sacred to them. I've witnessed people laughing at somebody's political fear that comes from the other side as a way of trying to actually soothe the other person's fear. This was a relative in this case, and this other person who voted for an opposite candidate was saying something they were afraid of, and this person said, surely, like, that's not gonna happen. And what that person didn't realize in the moment is that no, we are all tempted to believe the following: our side's fears are real, their side's fears are imagined, and then to make that judgment. But that certainly doesn't help us connect, because of how tender hopes and fears are, because of how much we kind of use them almost to test whether someone else can receive us. But Luis, I'm super curious to hear from you any thoughts you have, whether now or later in the conversation about that, because I've heard from a lot of folks that processing this election is sort of about what happens when you just don't feel the same way as somebody else. You're not matching each other. You're not able to match each other. People feel like if you don't agree with my feeling, that's the problem, not if you don't agree with my politics.
Yeah, this is so you just segued us beautifully into the next section, which is exactly what you just said. My need for you to agree with how I feel about this. And I want everyone just to notice those words and think, and specifically think about your own experience around this. Whether you've been the one that feels misunderstood and unseen because someone doesn't agree with how you feel, right? Notice that. Or if you've been the person receiving someone's anger because you don't agree with how they feel. Maybe you've been both. I'm sure all of us have somewhere in our lives. We can kind of draw from that. Just taking a moment to really settle into that, feel what that quality feels like in your body. When I tell them this thing's coming and they're not as scared as I am, what happens in my body? When I tell somebody, I'm not worried, I think we're going to be okay, and they get really mad at me, what happens? That's me, by the way. What happens in my body? Like really noticing, like what do we do in those moments? Because Monica's pointing to a very important relational thing, what we call a relational rupture, where I'm expecting and maybe even needing to be matched. Matching is an important word here, my friends. Matching and codependence are best friends. And I don't say that in a negative way. I mean, literally somatically, my body depends on yours to be at a certain level so I can settle. So when I'm really afraid of what's going to happen, I tell you, and you say, I'm afraid too, something about that settles me. There's a matching, and I'm like, oh, good, we both agree. You're not one of those people. Oh, we both agree. And you start settling, right? There's a sense of my body's literally, my settling is dependent on what you say or don't say. That's what I mean when I say codependent. Okay. Now that's about matching. Matching and witnessing are two different experiences. Witnessing is like, oh my God, you're afraid of that? Like, I don't have that fear, but I want to hear what this is about for you. Like, let me hear this. Teach me. And I really care, and I'm really curious, and I'm learning. I'm like, makes a lot of sense. I'm still not scared, but I totally get why you are. Like, let me know what I can do. I'm paraphrasing. This takes longer to get to. But witnessing someone's fear and connecting through empathy, like, I know what it's like to be scared, is a brilliant way we can start bridging the divide. Because at the end of the day, we all have the exact same thing. We all have a fear of some kind. We all have a need of some kind. And our candidate either meets it or doesn't. And so a bunch of people feel like their need gets met, like the people feeling hope right now, their needs are getting met. That's how they feel. Can any of us who feel bad about who got elected now think how good it feels when our needs are getting met politically? That feeling of like, oh, a burden has lifted. Someone sees me. I mean, can you go there and feel how you've experienced that in your lifetime? And let's go there. Let's feel it. Like, notice how that feels. Think of a time in your lifetime where someone won and you were just like, what a relief. And see where that lives in you. Just give that a moment. Because this is our humanity we're talking about. And same thing. Can you pause and feel the time that I lost, that my side lost, where someone won I didn't want to win, how that felt? We all have those feelings. We've all felt that. Just track that for a moment. When we can start connecting through that shared humanity of what that feels like to lose and what it feels like to win, we actually can connect over, oh, I know that feeling. So you know how like Monica's saying, like, agree with my feeling? I know that feeling. I don't even have to agree with it. I know it. I've lived it. Like, I get that. That's a very different way to connect than I need to agree with your feeling. The moment I need to agree with your feeling, division, because I'm not always going to agree with your feeling, but I have felt that. I can connect to that feeling, right? And I'm going to give an example. I was talking to Camille about this earlier. A great example of this, of how this works, is first of all, when you aren't matched and you're wanting to be matched, we tend to go into trauma response and we either pull away and avoid. This is where division comes that way, or we get really aggressive, we attack, we shame, we cancel, we try to tear people down. We go into some kind of desperate, expression because we're so desperate to be matched and we didn't get matched. It's literally on a cellular level, it feels like when a parent neglects you when you're 3. It's like that deep in our bones, right? So we either hide, run away, or we attack. I have seen in my lifetime the left and the right use the exact same words to the same statement to attack each other about something around body autonomy. And I think it's fascinating. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very evangelical, we called it the Middle South. It was Southern Pennsylvania. We call it the Middle South because it's like the welcome mat is as you're going into the South. And so I grew up in the Middle South. And what they would do is the evangelical right at that time, they probably still do, I don't know. If you were pro-choice, they would say you're responsible for murder. That was their response because they couldn't connect to what that meant for someone being pro-choice. They just said, you're responsible for murder. And it was a shaming tactic. It was like, I'm going to try to either change you that way or shame you that way. Obviously cause division. You're not opening up to someone with saying you're responsible for murder, right? Now, let's rewind, 3-4 years ago? Vaccines. I watched the left tell people who didn't want to get vaccines, you're responsible for murder in huge amounts, I mean, on mainstream media. So it's fascinating to see both sides use the exact same statement, you're responsible for murder, around a body autonomy conversation that they disagreed with. Instead of, like Monica said, oh, there's something sacred here. Like one side believes they're protecting life, let's say the evangelical right, where I grew up, and one side believed they were protecting life, the left that was pro-vaccine. They both believed they were protecting life. That is something to connect over. There's some kind of sacred truth that they both feel, even though they get to it in different ways. And that actually opens a portal of connection. Now, this isn't like weird spiritual philosophy. I do this with people all the time. And it's amazing to see two strangers that want nothing to do with each other very quickly settle in when they can understand and harmonize, empathize with that person's feeling, with what's sacred to them. But when I go into this thinking, well, I'm right, you're wrong, I've desecrated your values in that moment. And then through the division, I've effectively made you a myth. Because if you're not relating to someone, guess what they are? They're a myth. And every horrible thing that has ever been done to people and currently gets done to people happens because you're able to dehumanize them. You're able to make a story about them that makes them so other than you, so subhuman from you, that it justifies hating, it justifies blocking people's rights, it justifies actual oppression and even killing people, right? But that first step is I see you as an other because we disagree. That's the first step for me. So I want us to feel into that. How easy it is for us to do that to people we actually know and to people we don't know because we can't agree with their feelings. I don't have to agree with your feelings to humanize you. I get to understand your feelings. I get to be curious about your feelings. I get to still disagree with your feelings and what you believe in. And I humanize you at the same time. Part of what's interesting to me that I get a lot of, that I hear a lot over the last 2 years, the more public I am with this work, is people's association with humanizing and condoning. There's a real fear That if I see the human in you, I'm going to be okay with what you've done. And I find that really interesting because part of that fear makes sense because when we humanize, we do start to understand. We do start to even love. We do start to feel compassion, which feels like a boundary violation when someone's doing something horrible. You're like, why would I want to humanize that? All those things take, for me, they take us to the root of why someone does what they do. It helps us learn what's behind behavior, what's behind belief, what's behind like collective bias and ism. Like we learn what's behind that when we actually understand why this is sacred to them. Let's go back to what I said about freedom of speech and controversy. Just because it's not sacred to me doesn't mean it isn't the most sacred thing in your life. Just because I'm appalled by what you do doesn't mean to you it's not the most sacred thing that you believe in. For you, it meets a need, you find safety in it. Doesn't mean I accept it. Doesn't mean I don't like try to shift laws around it if I think it's really harmful. Like I'm allowed to do that as a free person. That's the great thing about being in America. And can I see you as a human? Can I connect to your fear the way I have felt fear? And coming back to our bodies right now as I say that, think right now, those of you here that are really upset that Donald Trump won, think about the idea when Monica just put forward. There are people that feel hope. There are people that are relieved. There are people that are getting their needs met right now, and or at least feeling like they are, right? Is there a party that can feel like I know how good that feels? And just track your body. This is not like a formula. You're not supposed to feel it. Really notice, does something block me? Do I feel a tension against that compassion or empathy? Do I feel like a sudden dissociation, like I can't feel my body at all? Does a really big emotion like anger or frustration overcome and I can't feel anything else? And just really see what your body does. Take a moment. And again, just seeing where what that's like. What if I access, I know how good that feels. I can actually connect to a human that feels good about that, just through that, not the beliefs, but I can connect through that feeling, noticing that. Or I cannot even get close to that. There is this instant shield that comes up. Like I have a boundary I can't even help, right? And this is why I love the body. No one here is doing this. Like our bodies do this. We're just learning. The shield comes up so fast, I can't even access empathy or humanity for someone that feels relieved. And for those of you who voted for Trump or somebody else, right? Think about there's people in this group right here who are hurting, who really, really wanted Kamala to win, who just felt like all their needs and safety would be met if that happened, and it didn't. Can you feel what that feels like? Can you be like, I know that feeling? And can you feel into that and connect to their humanity? Again, it's a can you, not you should. Just kind of track to see what your body does. Does a shield come up? Do you laugh, like Monica said, like, "Oh, ridiculous, they thought she would meet their need"? What happens in your body that keeps you from just accessing that kind of tender humanity of, damn, I know that feeling. That sucks. I feel you. Imagine if we could do that with each other, if we could start there before going into policies, beliefs, identities, stories. If we just were like, I know how good it feels to win. I'm glad you feel good. Let's talk about what we disagree with. Or, damn, I'm sorry you lost. That is so painful. I know that. Let me know what I can do. And just kind of feel that for yourself. Like imagine offering that or having that be offered to you. Like just see how your body does with that. How it starts to dissolve the myth a little bit. And I'll say one thing I'm really grateful for is I've spent the last, I mean, most of my life, but especially the last 6 years, really intentionally creating friendships and communities that are super diverse, like where no one actually agrees with each other, but people like each other. So I'm constantly just hearing all these different sides of different stories and belief systems, and it's amazing. And I'll just share this current election. it fascinates me to see in droves a lot of people thinking, wow, this is really ridiculous that someone who, and I'm using these terms that I hear, someone who's a person of color, especially an immigrant person of color, they would never vote for Trump. I can't believe white people did this to them. A lot of my friends are saying this. My entire Puerto Rican family, first generation immigrant, all voted Trump. And they are so happy right now. And you have to understand when and I went to an event in Brooklyn, 200 trans people all voted for Trump. When you find these strange subcultures you can't even know exist, you learn so much about the complexity of human beings. You learn that there's not just one story people are attaching to. There's not just one truth. There are so many truths that people are attaching to. There are so many things that people say, this is really sacred and important to me. And this person meets it, even though I don't like 80% of what else they do, they meet this one thing and that feels good to me. To paint a picture of a whole group of people as if they're a monolith, left, right, libertarian, independent, white, black, man, whatever it is. It's so, it distills the complexity of things. And when we're talking about humanizing somebody and bridging a gap and playing with curiosity, complexity is really what we're talking about. What's our capacity for complexity? And I'll tell you, when I used to get really triggered with politics, I didn't have a high capacity for complexity because I had a truth in my mind. These people are like this, these people are like this. And when something crossed that, I didn't even want to look at it. I mean, nope, nope, that will dismantle my whole belief system. And it did. It destroyed me. And I'm so grateful for it because I can walk in a room now and I can look at someone and I don't even imagine who they voted for. I don't even think I know what you care about. I'm like, tell me what you care about. Because luckily, thanks to podcasts and the ability to look at different media sources, I've learned so much about so many different groups of people on all sides and in between. But I couldn't do that without the practices I'm teaching you today. When I'm listening to someone say something on a podcast that's like mind-blowingly controversial to me, and I don't know how they got there, I don't feel like I'm threatened anymore like I used to. So I'm able to actually feel the sensation, like, oh, hold on, pause the podcast. Let me get my pillow and just kind of look around. I'm in my room. They're not here. Nothing's happened yet. Okay, let me see what they have to say. And over time, my capacity builds for controversy and for hearing what people think and what they don't think. And people that look me in the eyes and like, I disagree with this whole way you're living. I'm against it. And I think it's a really, really important piece to be with. I'm going to say one more thing and I'm going to turn it over to Monica. Actually, you jump in first, Monica.
I wanted to jump in on what you were saying because, you know, in part, we're talking about building the capacity to be honest, to stay sort of observant of your own feelings and thoughts vis-a-vis your own honest sensations and your ability to observe all of that. But we're also talking about the capacity we can build to be curious about somebody else. And you cannot be curious while you're too afraid. You can't, because your body and your mind will be in the trauma responses. And even if you really wanted to have a curious conversation, if your body's not there, it's not going to be very curious. It's likely to be more kind of performative and very awkward, and you're just trying, but you can't, right? So you're going to need to find your way out and through. So when it comes to the capacity to be curious, there's a couple things that I've tried going right off what Luis was saying that have been kind of surprisingly effective. And they were inspired by this word that someone recently invented and has become a word. And the word is sonder. And sonder is the sense that every individual around you has a life as deep and complicated as your own. And there's a couple of tricks that I use, and I have actually done this while I'm in that place where I'm nervous about, we're talking about politics, and maybe they agree with what I think about the left and the right, but maybe they don't. And can I stay strong? And so the first thing I'll do is I'll imagine, this is going to sound so weird. I'll imagine that I am an extra in their Netflix show. That there's a scene with us and they're the protagonist. And I'm kind of over here just being in their scene. And it really helps me humanize them. And I do this just out in the world as a practice to remind myself that, Luis was saying on the internet is a non-place that makes us into non-people. We don't carry those reminders of those stories. We easily forget. We're just our slogans. We're just our bios on Twitter. We forget that there's a depth and complexity there. But in the real world, each of us has that complexity. So how am I coming into this other person's Netflix show? What impact am I having on their day? Like, how interesting, how curious. And then the other thing I'll do is, especially if it's someone I don't know well, I will imagine, and also especially if I've already made judgments about them as I approach them or as I look at them, and maybe there's all these assumptions coming up about, well, who they probably voted for based on how they look or how they seem or how old they are or where they come from and all this stuff. I will picture them. I've seen their face. I will picture them throwing their hands open in a big hug to someone they love that they haven't seen in a really long time. And I'll just imagine that. Because I was talking about we can create the taste of ketchup. We can create, the nightmare that we read about in that article that scares us, and we can make it feel like it's happening right now. Well, we can do the same thing with somebody who disagrees with us or who might disagree with us or who we're already feeling guarded against before we've even asked a single question. And remember that they've probably thrown their arms open in a big hug to someone they love. That has happened with this person. And I play that little movie out in my mind. It takes all of 2 seconds. And then it just somehow brings me back into myself. Like I've done that too. Okay, cool. And there's a safety I find in that whatever this person is about to be with me in this conversation about the election that might get really tense and fiery and hot, and we're going to be like, ooh, like, are we matching? Are we not matching? Are we cool? Are we not? We're going to have conversations with ourselves, or we're having conversations with each other, and it's going to be all kinds of like fireworks. Whatever that person is going to be in that moment, if they're going to be angry or upset, if I'm going to be angry or upset, they've also been these other things. They are all of the things. And so am I. And so this conversation it's a collision. It's an opportunity to see what's there. It is not a judgment on me. Whatever I believe, coming into this conversation, if this other person doesn't like it, well, okay, that's data, that's interesting, but it doesn't need to feel like a condemnation of me, and vice versa. So I also have this mantra that works well for me that is laughable if you think about it a certain way, but is really powerful, which is, I look forward to being wrong. When I sense my guard going up, because I really, I want to be right. We all want to be right. I look forward to being wrong. And I pause long enough to realize the truth of that statement. If I discover that I'm wrong, that will mean that I am closer to something I feel is true. And if I discover I am wrong through the collision and interaction with this other person, that will mean that this collision has taught me something I didn't previously know, something that affects me. I think sometimes we think that we are so vulnerable to other people changing our minds without our say-so, that even by coming close to somebody who thinks or feels differently, we may be like monsterizing ourselves or something. And that's simply not how it works. Our minds change when there's fertile ground for them to change, right? If something someone says affects you, boy, it's because your mind was already right there, and maybe they've just given language or something just clicks and you go, oh yeah. And so you've discovered you were wrong. Was that so bad? Was that so bad? So all of those things really help me humanize the other person, keep a sense of humility, and but ultimately find the kind of safety to be myself and to be honest about what I think, and not worry so much if I say one thing and then this other person says something else and I go, oh, that's a good point. I need to think about that. I don't have to be consistent. Why do we have to be consistent? Maybe we should just grow and learn. So I'll leave it there because I went on for a while, Luis, but I will pause.
I just want to underline the I love being wrong, or can I be wrong? I want us to feel into that. Because I'm at the point where I actually like it now. I did not used to, but I actually like being wrong now. Because like if I expect humility from other people and I expect transformation and accountability from other people and I can't be wrong, it's like I can't expect that. I need to do it here first. And so there's something massively powerful, like when we talk about the counter vortex, that pendulation in the nervous system, that's the body being wrong for a second. And it heals the person suffering with PTSD because their body is saying, nothing's safe, everything's horrible, I'm going to die. That's what the body's saying when you have PTSD. And then it orients to, wait, I'm on this couch right now and it's holding me and it's kind of comfortable. I was wrong. I'm not dying right now. And it takes this big breath, and we call it a parasympathetic response, and the nervous system starts to settle, and the adrenals stop firing, and the tension starts to release. That's the beauty of being wrong. When you're right, you're going tight-fisted into a conversation to change or prove, right? And I'm going to bring somebody up, then I'm going to turn it over to Camille, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you, which I wanted to do almost 2 hours ago. But I realized that I think the lecturing and what we're teaching is much more important to start with, so then we can really see what you're living with in your body now that we had some time together. Um, I am in love with a man named Daryl Davis. And if you've never heard of this man, please look up Daryl Davis. I did an interview with him on my podcast, so you can type in Holistic Life Navigation, Daryl Davis. Maybe Evan, you can put a link in if you want to. Daryl Davis is one of my heroes. Okay. He is a Black man amongst many things, but his identity is an important part of the story. He, for the last 40 years, goes to KKK rallies and befriends leaders and members of the KKK. The only way he is able to do that is yeah, someone put up music notes. He's an incredible musician too. The only way he is able to do that is he walks in knowing the difference between my life is a threat and they don't like me. The difference between what they believe is what I don't believe, and I'm safe or I'm threatened. He knows that difference. So he can sit in a hotel room for hours with someone who's literally telling him every reason they think he shouldn't exist, telling him that to his face. And he's able to feel into his body and be with the reality of, wow, this person does not know me. These ideas are weird. He's not taking an ounce of it personally. And I'm using him as an example because he doesn't go in trying to be right or to change anybody. What he's found over and over and over again, he's met hundreds of them, maybe thousands at this point, definitely hundreds. What he does over and over again, what he finds over and over again is when he sits back and just listens to every reason they think he's less of a human than they are, he starts to notice something happening in the other person. They start getting curious and confused, like, why aren't you arguing with me? They're like, why are you just, you have nothing to say? And he's like, no, I'm just truly curious. Like, tell me. And he truly is curious. He's that he can't believe it in his mind that they hate him. His whole theory is, how can they hate me? They don't know me. And he's right. How can they hate me? They don't know me. I think that, how can I hate another side? I don't even know them. Like, it's such a story I've been given. So he knows they've been given the story too, and it has nothing to do with him. So over the years, 200 of these clans members had denounced themselves, left the clan, and given him their robes. He has 200 framed robes in his house hanging up. Now, that doesn't mean every person he's met with has done that. There's hundreds that haven't, right? That they're like, nope, I'm going back to the clan. My point is, he has the ability for 40 years to do this, and he's not dead. He's very alive and happy. He's actually healthier now than he's ever been, last time I talked to him. And he's learned that anyone can go into any situation if you have curiosity. And a lot of times you can emerge with friendship if you're just able to witness and learn from each other. And that's not to tell all of you to like go to someone that absolutely opposes your life and sit with them and have tea. That's a Daryl Davis thing. Not everyone can do this or needs to do this in this lifetime. He's showing us what that looks like. Okay? So he's showing us what it looks like to live a life without fear in that way and without division, and what it looks like to humanize other people who would dehumanize you. That's what he's showing us. And when I used that example earlier, how I've seen the left and the right both say to opposite people, you're condoning murder if you won't get vaccinated or if you believe in abortion, either way. That's the opposite. That's someone in fear. That's someone who's scared. That's someone who's angry. That's someone not curious to humanize the other person and get to know what's sacred to them, right? So they tell the other person who they are. They tell them what they're doing. They shun them. That does this. What Daryl Davis has done is literally do this. It's important just to consider that for yourself, what your capacity is in your life to do that. Is it the people you follow on social media? Is it your closest friends? Is it someone in your community? What's my capacity to open my curiosity to someone I disagree with? This is the beauty of podcast era. You don't have to even sit with them. They don't even have to know you exist. You can just listen to them in long form and start to see, what am I learning here about this person that I judge so harshly? It's an incredible practice, not to condone their behavior, but to free you from the ongoing stress of fear, hatred, and dehumanization. It frees you from it. It does not feel good to hold those things. Camille, I want you to give us some of your medicine as we close this piece, and then we're going to start moving on to your questions, your shares.
Yeah, I'll share two things. First, about Daryl Davis. One of the things I love that he acknowledges, like Luis was sharing, he enters into a lot of these interviews. They're saying very, very disrespectful things about him, particularly Black people in general. And Luis asked, what about when they got violent sometimes? Did that happen? What did you do? And he said, oh yeah, they got violent. And then I beat their ass. So let's be clear, he was able to attune to when he was in fact in threat. And after he beat their ass, he checked to see if they were okay. And sometimes they had a conversation, sometimes they didn't. But the fact that he was able to be curious did not negate or take away his ability to mobilize when threat was actually apparent. So I always like to call that out in his wisdom and his experience. And then two, the thing about humanizing the quote unquote other side that I always appreciate is that I learn a lot. I've learned a lot by watching people who are entrenched in fear. And I notice that when people are entrenched in fear, there are things that they have the capacity to do, whether that's to storm buildings, bomb buildings, kidnap people, threaten people, kill people. And I've decided that that's not the way I want to show up in this world. But I also recognize that because they are human and I am human, it means that I have the capacity for such things. And if I can witness, not excuse, but if I can witness and understand what brings them to such a place where they do such a thing, I can also, from a place of humility, recognize that if I stay entrenched of my fear, I could very much get to that same place where I do the exact same thing. And so I'm not here to say whether you should or shouldn't do those things. I'm simply sharing my practice where there's a way in which I choose or desire to show up in this world. And there's a way that I choose or desire not to. And that is what motivates me to do this work, to humanize the quote unquote other side.
Just feel that, everybody. Thank you, Camille. So beautiful. Just really seeing like where, really check your body again. Where does that touch you? Where do you feel a boundary to that? Because it's different for everybody. Some people are like, oh, that's so nice to imagine. Others like, nope. Just see what your body's doing when you hear that. Just taking a moment to notice that. I love how you put that. Every human has the capacity to do anything. That's what's so amazing. Like we literally can go any way in this lifetime. And what's amazing about the biochemistry of stress is, with adrenaline, the more adrenaline, the more likely you are to harm somebody or hurt somebody because your animal feels threatened. And then eventually you lash out because one of those trauma responses is called fight response. And that's what it does. It attacks. And sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's physical. But the more this is building up in you, the closer you are to those other places. And I love that you bring in that piece about Daryl Davis, because people really believe if I get settled, if I feel safe with someone, if I feel open to someone, I'm going to lose all my boundaries. Your body will never lose its trauma responses. They are so packaged in there. It's like breathing. It's like coughing. Like it's just ready when you need them. Like Daryl Davis can be sitting there drinking a beer, laughing with someone, and in 2 seconds pushing them against a wall, right? When he needs to. That lives in all of us. So for me, my boundaries have only gotten better over the years as I've made sense of like, oh, I'm disappointed, but I'm not threatened. They disagree with me, but I'm not threatened. My boundaries are even better now because in the past, I had no boundaries because I was so afraid to be injured or hurt or attacked because I was a lot growing up. I was so afraid to be different or say the wrong thing because I thought I was going to be hurt. So my boundaries were out the window. I did what's known as the fawning response, where I just agreed with everything everyone said in front of me. So everything stayed nice and placid, right? So my boundaries have gotten better. And people I've worked with that are really aggressive or really avoidant, that gets better because they're not always in this adrenalized state. You come down, you start to notice the difference between, fuck, I do not like what you're saying, and I'm okay right now. And that is a really good place to be. Especially as Americans, we are a multicultural nation. We have lots of different people living here, especially like per, per square mile in most states. I mean, my one block, every single person is vastly different and from different parts of the world. That's important. We're not going to agree on everything. So to actually move forward as a country, regardless of who's president, I think we really need as individual citizens to know how to be in our bodies when we face controversy and difference. Otherwise, we're going to think we need someone to preside over us to keep us peaceful. We have so much more power than that. So I find a lot of like when Monica's talking about hope, I find so much hope in teaching people somatics and learning how do I not dehumanize someone because of what they believe in? And how do I actually build my capacity for difference with people? Because for me, what's worse than a president I don't like, and I really have never liked any president, what's worse than a president I don't like is a country that hates each other. Like that to me is so much worse. I'd rather have a horrible, horrible authoritarian president than an entire group of people that can't even talk or be in a room together. Okay? That's me. So just notice for yourself again what you're getting from this, what your capacity is. Oh, and by the way, not to stir up controversy, I'm not saying I think Trump's gonna be authoritarian. I actually don't, which I know will piss a lot of people off. I just use the authoritarian example. Just wanted to be clear about that. I'm not like signaling what I believe. I just in general, that's how I feel. If someone's gonna, usurp power, and I've seen every president do it in my lifetime, I care about the people in my neighborhood. Those are the ones I want to be able to connect to the most. So just come back to yourself for a minute as we start settling, because now we're gonna go to you, right? And this is where it can be really activating to talk out loud in front of people in a recording, people you don't know. Sometimes you don't even talk about these things with people. So it's like the first time. And we're going to go over a little bit. Monica, it's your birthday. You get to leave whenever you want to. Do you want to go over with us or do you want to leave at the hour point? Yeah, okay. So
Oh,
we're probably gonna,
yeah, I'll probably stick around a little bit. Yeah.
okay, great. So we're going to go over probably 15 minutes. Just checking in with my team. Is anyone not okay with that? Because we can switch hosting. Are we cool with that? Okay. Okay. If we're not, just hop off as long as one of you are here to keep the hosting. That's good. So what I'm going to ask is we're going to go into 45-second shares. So a little timer comes up. The way this works is you click react and you click raise hand, and that will let us know who wants to speak out loud. If you don't want to speak out loud, but you still want to say what you want to say, you can DM Camille and she'll say it anonymously for you. So if you're raising your hand, you get 45 seconds to speak. I'm going to be really clear what I'm asking for and what we're going to hold the boundary with is we're not going into policies. Okay, this isn't a debate. This isn't about I hate this policy, I love this policy. It's not about why you love Trump, why you hate Trump. It's about what are you getting from this session and what do you need for your life leaving here that you didn't get so we can speak to it. So you can either share like what's alive from you, what wisdom's coming through, what you're hearing, and that can be your share, or it can be like, I'm having an issue with this thing. This isn't making sense to me, right? And it can intersect with something. You can be like, if I'm losing my rights, how does this work? Like I'm not saying don't have free speech here, say what you want, but I prefer if you don't use the 45 seconds to talk about your political opinions. I want this to be about you. What's your body feeling? What are you learning from this? What do you need more support from with? Okay. And it's beautiful to hear even what's settled in you, what you're learning. Helps as a collective to kind of learn more together. Like, oh, yeah, that was said earlier. I missed that. Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Camille. She's going to call on people and she's going to pop around. So it's no specific order. And again, 45 seconds. And feel free to share in the DM through her as well if you want to share anonymously. Anything you want to add to that, Camille, feel free.
So let's get into it. April.
Oh, hi, thanks. I really appreciate this space, so thank you for holding it. I just finished my intermediate 3 with SE. My question, though, what's coming up for me is reciprocity. If anyone could speak to reciprocity, because what I notice is when I share from my heart, it feels like there's no openness from the other side for me for what I'm sharing. Does that make sense? Like, so
Absolutely.
I'm looking for that reciprocity, and it feels like it's missing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I first want to ask Camille if you want to share anything about that in particular first. If you do, if not.
Yeah, so the as I listened, one of the first things that came up for me around reciprocity was sometimes we can miss reciprocity because and I think Luis, you touched on this a little bit earlier, sometimes what we're really seeking, or what the body in particular is really seeking, is validation. So that would be the first thing I'd be curious about noticing. Is it that I feel an emptiness, or I'm not being met? Either I don't feel like the actual political beliefs, or like we were talking about earlier, like my feeling, I don't feel like they're being validated. That's the first thing that I thought about.
Yeah, I felt that too. And I was curious. One thing I wanted to say was when you're speaking to people who oppose you, let's say in this case, like when you talk about the other side, usually when we're speaking to the other side, whether it's like a group or one person, to expect reciprocity is going to get us in the way. It's going to get in the way of that because we want to do it. This is important because it speaks to our human needs of co-regulation, is what April's really bringing in that I'm hearing. Co-regulation is the opposite of what I said earlier around co-dysregulation. Whereas when I'm with this other human, something settles, like I feel safety. So attune to the co-regulators in your life, attune to, and like I said earlier, attune to the people that agree with you, attune to the people you already feel safe with, not to get stuck with them only, but attuned to them. Like they're in my life. I feel them in my heart. I feel them having my back as I talk to someone that doesn't agree with me, because chances are that other side of person may never agree with you, may never give you that reciprocity that you're open to. Because in a way, I think about this a lot with just literal consent and permission. I'm going there to open my heart to you. You might not have the same intention. So it's kind of like what's even being said or expected in the relational field. So you really want to get curious. I might be being sneaky in a good way and opening my heart and being really like curious, but you may not have any intention to do that. So I just had to be really, really conscious. Am I seeking reciprocity from someone that doesn't even know what I'm doing? Right? Or are we going into this like consciously together saying, hey, let's come in together and like hold space for each other? That'd be a little different. Excellent piece to bring in. Monica, do you want to add in anything to that before we go on?
I think you both covered it well, so we can move on.
Okay, thanks, April.
Tim.
Hey y'all. So here's a fear that sticks with me through this whole conversation. This is a group of like-minded people who are open to exploring processing the election. And there are a lot of people who aren't. And there are a lot of people in power who are holding power, preparing to wield power, preparing to use power to dismantle avenues towards expression, towards exercise of free power, et cetera. So I'm afraid that this human local technique is being thwarted by people who are outmaneuvering, out preparing us who have the power to do that, like the literal power, including a police state.
I would say I'm going to speak to that first. That's cool. And then Camille, love to hear everything. Again, I hold this, what you're saying, like I hold everything. Feel what it's like to think that and see where that lives for a moment. And everyone, anyone who agreed and put up emojis, like really notice, like when you think of that, what happens in your body. I remember in my past this exact fear I had with another candidate, so I can feel that. I'm like, oof, I know that feeling. So it's like feel where that is. For me, it's like in my solar plexus, like, oh, it's like a fist. So just feeling where that lives. And simultaneously, right now, the reality that it's not. Just feeling both for a minute. So I'll take a moment to do that. And this is the part about somatics that I'm going to say sucks. It's what I love about it, but it also sucks. There's a mystery to it. It's not a formula. It's not bureaucratic. There isn't a law in stone. Something happens when you're able to do what you're doing with me right now over time, not just with me, but like every day. Here's that thing that's preparing for this future that terrifies me based on a certain individual or a group. And then here's like what it's like to be where I am right now. What emerges from that? Because I think of people who have been so disempowered and oppressed and still got their countries back around the world. People who have been under the thumb for decades and then found freedom. Like, it's amazing the things we can do when we're connected to that other place that has agency. And that future fear, if we all felt that thing that happened when we thought about a future that scared us, completely represses agency. That's the most interesting thing about a freeze response, the trauma response. Freeze, when you feel a tension coming in, your body is literally bracing for something that hasn't happened yet, and you're losing agency while it's bracing. So the mystery for me is when you don't lose agency from your own body, how does it interact with the world around you? Whether that world is safe or there's actual oppression and something going on, how does it interact with it when you have agency? Would you add anything to that, Camille? And it's an excellent question, Tim.
Yeah, it's gonna sound a bit contrite to say this, but I'm just gonna offer it because it's my truth. Like Louise was sharing, there have been examples throughout time and history where people have had rescinded and oppressed rights. And that fucking sucks. And their humanity, at least for me, wasn't contingent on that oppression not being there. That is to say, and I'll even get more personal, in particular for my grandparents. They lived in a country that did not value them simply because of their skin color. And they actively experienced that devaluation every single day. And there were times where they could not speak about that devaluation because they could in fact be killed. And they still knew who they were. They still had their sense of self. They still knew their truth. So I like to hold that. Again, we're holding both. So yeah, do I want my freedom of speech to go away? Absolutely not. Am I going to be vigilant of certain steps? Definitely. That may lead to that. Absolutely. And if that worst case scenario comes to bear, who I am, my sense of self, my safety is not contingent upon that. Now, I do want to slow down one part I did say in there, because I think this is also important, again, about that potential future threat. For example, whether it's the downfall of democracy, or for many people, the belief that Trump is Hitler. I would say, does Donald Trump have the capacity to get to a state where his regime is similar to that of Hitler? Sure. I think anyone has the capacity for that because they're humans. But can I also attune to the fact that it's not a Nazi state right now? Because if it was, we couldn't be having this conversation. So I know there's at least some space in between there. And so what do I want to do with that space? Again, so it allows me to come back to that, to right now, what's my agency? What are my choices right now? Rather than my body orienting to a state where it feels like my choices will be completely eliminated, which they very could be, but they aren't right now. I hope that makes sense.
And I always get curious too, if I have the fear of like police state coming or Trump, Hillary, why do I have that fear? Like, who gave me that fear and how have I experienced it? Because it's two different things. When people posture on someone's character or what they're going to do or who they are, that's different from what I'm actually experiencing and what I'm seeing in my life. So I always like to question my beliefs too. Were they handed to me over and over again by something and now I'm believing it? Or am I actually experiencing something in my day-to-day that's telling me, oh, this is really, really here?
Mhm.
Monica, what are you thinking?
Real quickly, I just wanted to say that the last thing that I would want if I was afraid that someone would get the power to really oppress me is to lose my power. And so when we talk about agency, we're talking about power. And there's a kind of disempowerment, I believe, at least on the individual level, when I, dissociate from what's going on. My fear takes over to such a degree that I am going with the flow of people around me. We're now storming. We're now going. We're now fighting, and we're reacting, and we're reacting, and we're reacting. And maybe we knock down that building, or maybe we overthrow that thing. Then what? Well, no one thought about it because we were all there's a sense in which, the history of social movements shows that, if power is going to sustain whatever change it wants, it has to be steady, has to be stable, and sometimes the movements that are rash don't last. I mean, sure, they can make big changes and messes need to get cleaned up, I guess, but I don't want to lose my power. If someone is using their power against me, I want to know my power as a citizen and my power as someone who can protect the guardrails that exist in this nation. And boy, each of us have a lot of power to work on those guardrails.
And I would just add, just because of people who are witnessing this, please, if you voted for Trump, if you were feeling hopeful, if you're excited, I want to hear from you too. So put your hand up or DM Camille if you're too afraid to put your hand up. Like, you're good in my book. I want to hear from everybody and how they're feeling this. So thank you, Tim. Let's continue.
Rainbow.
Hi, thank you both for holding this space. Yeah, it really, I'm noticing a lot come up, and there's some things that I'm struggling with, other things I'm resonating with. I mean, even just in my personal relationships with people that mostly agree with us, like most people I know have a window of tolerance that's like this big right now and are activated by, like, I was with some friends the other day and like we heard like a noise and we're like, what's that? What's happening? Like, and then it's like, if your friend says this instead of that, it's like we're all on edge. So I can see how this helps with relationships with people you agree with. I guess what I'm struggling with too is like, as a trans person, I feel like I'm constantly scanning for danger. Like, which bathroom do I use? Do I go to this neighborhood with the Trump flags? Like, will I be hurt? And I guess I struggle a lot with that. Like, how do I find safety in myself while being like real? Like, things happen. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll respond to that directly just with Camille's example earlier. So let's hear things happen. No question. Are they happening now? It's so annoying for us to keep saying that. Like, believe me, it can be really frustrating. And it's the only practice towards sanity I have found in my lifetime. It's like, yes, they happen, not denying it, preparing, aware. Is it happening now? And I think one of my favorite experiences with a student a while back who was doing a demo with me, which I didn't do today, it just didn't feel necessary or right. But I was doing a demo with her, and she was living in a home with someone who was abusive. And the person was on the other side of the wall during the demo. And so there's her door. We're all seeing it. And on the other side of the door is this person. I mean, it can't get any closer in that moment, right? And so in the session, we did exactly what we're doing here. Like, Camille and I never waver from this position, regardless of what someone's going through, even when it seems like, I mean, we worked with people in active war zones, and it's like they're there while it's happening. And we still do the same thing. Okay, you hear the person on the other side of the doorway. Yeah, let's feel where you hear them, and you feel what happened in the past. And like, it's unfortunately probably going to happen again. Where do you feel that? Okay, now what's it like to know they're not in the room with you? And this amazing settling coming over her body. And that settling was not denying that there's an abusive person on the other side of the door. The settling with someone I worked with who listening to missiles explode above their head, not denying that happening, but they're noticing, and the missile didn't hit me yet, right? It is so important for me to live this way, just like Camille's neighborhood example. Otherwise, the animal body is projecting, just like Rainbow said, all these people like window tolerance, the body is constantly projecting everything as a possible threat rather than the reality of, oh my God, right now I'm okay. Like, what a miracle that I'm okay right now. And how does the body feel into that? How does that create so much space? So when someone says something unkind or hateful, or there's a huge experience of rupture, I have all that in me to experience that with. That to me is some of the best way of caring for yourself. And so I just wanted to say that again because I appreciate the question. And I know it's going to be the number one question for a lot of people. Like, how do I not see the reality of something and at the same time be okay? It's like what we're saying right here. We pendulate between this is what could happen or what has happened. Is it happening now? And can I feel that? Anything in the DMs, Camille?
Yes, let me get one from the DMs.
And while you're doing that, if you are a Republican or someone that voted for Trump and your hand is up, not to single you out if you're not, just DM Camille because we don't know. And I want to make sure to get an opposite voice if someone wants that.
I was trying to condense some of this. So someone shared, what came to my mind is that during the Islamophobic riots in the UK earlier this year, an imam from a mosque surrounded by rioters cooked food for them and went out into the riots and fed and befriended them. He ended the evening exchanging phone numbers.
Amazing. And baby girl has come to say hello.
She has, um, let's see, someone shared, Trump was already president. He was no Hitler. So why would you think this?
People get mad at me, but that's what I've been doing too. I'm like, well, I did okay those 4 years. I'm okay.
Yeah. And I would say with that, yeah, that's a great question to ask. If you're genuinely asking that, not necessarily to me, but if you're in conversation, you happen to be with someone who says Trump is like Hitler. If you're genuinely asking the question, why would you say this? Have that conversation. But I invite you to notice, am I asking this from a place of actual curiosity? Or is this a judgment? Like, why would you believe this? If both places, we can notice their data point, something for us to be with. In addition to asking that question, again, if you're able to have that capacity with the conversation with the individual, I'd also get curious about what comes up in my own body when I hear people equate Trump with Hitler. What do I notice my body do when I hear that? Or secondly, when have I said or believed something similar?
Let's just pause with that because that's a big question. When have I said or believed something similar? I have a personal practice whenever I fear somebody or go into thinking really mean things about them. I'm like, oh, wait, how am I like them? And it's this same thing I was saying earlier about how can I like connect to your feelings? Like I don't agree that you're scared right now, but I know what it's like to be scared. Like when Tim shared about police state, I remember that. Like I was in that in 2007. Like I was paranoid in 2007. I really believed the town I lived in was going to become a police state. I was terrified. I remember that fear. It was horrible. So I don't even feel close to that now, but I feel what that feels like. It's like that's such a tender, scary thing to live with. So I don't have to agree with your fear, but I connect to it. I know that feeling, right? I'll let you continue, Camille.
Tina, please come off mute.
You can now too.
Okay. I am going to be brave enough in this space to say that I am a registered Republican. I am very moderate. I have voted both ways in different elections. And I do want to thank Luis and your team for creating a space where we can have these open and honest conversations, because I have felt like I have been in the middle of political tug of war my entire life in my family and between my ex-husband. I do have a son in the military, so it's a different concern. I'm also a female that has issues with things that are going on in healthcare. So I think there's a lot of nuances. I guess what I want to just say is thank you for helping me feel not alone and more at peace. And I think in the discussion on reciprocity, I just want to say that I think I try to remember I'm willing to be love and to open my heart to people. And my love does not mean it requires them to accept it, agree with it, validate it. And I think I just try to remind myself that whether I feel fearful or I feel hopeful or I feel love, that's contagious. And so I just think, where can I bring my courage, my hope, and my love to combat or create a space to lessen the fear?
Tina, thank you so much, love. I appreciate that. Thanks for speaking up. And even just feel how you survived. And you gave us a lot of good wisdom.
Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, just want to say one thing. It feels a little bit unfortunate if the original speaker gets only 45 seconds and then the responses can be quite long. And it feels like sometimes not enough for people to express what they possibly feel at this moment. I can very relate to what you said, Tim, earlier. And for most of my life, I felt like I would be betraying the cause or my values if I would allow myself to actually feel okay in that moment. Like if I feel threat, if I feel like, yeah, there's injustice, I need to do something about it. How can I find happiness in that moment? That felt like betrayal. But now I come to understand it's the other way around. I betray myself if I allow myself to be pulled away from myself all the freaking time, which is my experience. Oh, I wanted to say a little bit more, but
You
that's
can
all.
finish your thought. Go ahead, finish your thought.
And I grew up feeling emotionally very unsafe, and I always felt like I need to have an outside environment that is safe. Only then I can find safety. The journey in my life now, and thanks to somatics, I find like, no, the safety is in me. I have to discover that. And once I do that, the perspective totally changes. I can stay true to myself and be curious, which I couldn't be in the past. It's still an ongoing struggle for me, but it's such a different perspective.
Camille, say it louder for the people in back. 'Cause I know what you're hearing. Thank you, Martin. Do you want to dive into that briefly?
Yes, when we seek safety outside of ourselves, it is conditional and never enough. And so that can come in lots of different forms, whether that's I need to look a certain way, I need to lose a certain amount of weight, I need to make a certain amount of money, I need to be in this type of relationship. This particular person needs to win. This person needs to see me, agree with me, understand my experience. It is conditional and never enough. That is, even if I get one person to agree with me, well, what about the other person? Or if that person doesn't agree with me, now suddenly I'm not safe. So yeah, when we seek safety outside ourselves, it's conditional and never enough.
We're gonna land on that because we're already 15 minutes over. Okay, so let's just pause. Those of you that had your hands up, I apologize. We don't have the time to go further, but just really taking in that piece. It's one of the greatest questions we can ask ourselves. Am I looking out there for safety, or am I looking in here? And it's a real question. It's a real question to ask. Because there's a reality, if I'm looking that way and a bomb's going off, I'm not going to walk toward it. We know that, right? And what's happening in here? So even if that's your reality, that is that intensely violent and oppressive, which for most people here, we'll never see that. We're very, very lucky. If it's that oppressive and violent, what's happening here is still just as important, right? You honor both. But when we're learning what we've learned in here with so many shares, with what Camille shared, I'm sharing, Monica's sharing, look around again. Let's close how we started off. Look around. Look where you are. Does your environment reflect your future fears? Or is it the opposite? Are you free right now? And that's the complete opposite of what you're afraid is going to happen. Those of you who are happy, those of you that are very happy that Trump won, feel how good that feels for you. Can you use that safety you feel to go into situations where someone who's on the left or a different party is terrified and angry and scared? Can you use your safety as a little capacity for them? It's like, yes, I know why you're scared. Tell me about it. I'm going to tell you who I am so I can help you with that fear. Tell me about you being scared. Like, imagine what you can offer people when your side wins. Like, that's a whole resource you have to bring to us. It's amazing. And again, those of us that are scared, I'm going to say those of you because I'm truly not scared. Those of you that are scared, I respect it. Keep seeing where you are. That's the best thing you can do. And keep noticing, am I attuning to people? and medias and places that are posturing what's going to happen? Is that driving up my fear? Or am I looking at places that connects me to where I am? Because where you are is where your agency is. Again, even under the most oppressive regimes in our history and currently happening, the agency is always in here. That's how people survive unthinkable things, right? So you don't attune to the person oppressing you, you attune to the agency they're trying to oppress. And that's the thing I learned from my ancestors, the living ones that are gone now, but when they were alive, the elders that came from things I'll never experience. Amazing how they survived because they kept staying here, regardless of what the world was saying around them. So I'd like to close this with people DMing Camille. What are you leaving here with? What's alive for you? And it can be, I'm sad. It can be, I'm hopeful. It can be, this thing you said made sense. Like whatever it is, it works for us. It doesn't have to be like jolly. It can be, it's lovely, but it doesn't have to be. And she's going to read them anonymously, and then we're going to close.
Grief and hope. My agency is alive. Sad and hopeful. Peace. I'm remembering that finding safety within is possible and happening. Feeling deeply grateful for this space. Feel like my capacity has expanded. Feeling relief, curiosity, and gratitude. The safety is within me. I have more peace in my heart. Afraid and hopeful. Inside, I feel like I'm smiling. I'm so encouraged that you put words to my life's experiences. Safety is a process, a practice, and an inside job. I have a choice to pendulate. I feel like I can take a deep breath and pause. This space will be a resource for me. It felt incredibly human and filled with life. I'm struck by the parallels between intimate conflict and political conflict. Clarity and hope. I'm hopeful I will keep looking to myself for safety within me.
One more, Camille.
This is a very helpful practice, honoring the real reasons for fear while recognizing I am safe now.
Thank you, love. So one more time, let's just attune to the people here who sat through 2 hours of this crap together. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Really just see the faces here, see how we're feeling. Notice how you're feeling now compared to how it was when you first came in. Remember, you will not be recorded. No one will see you if you put your camera on now. So nice to see the faces of those of you who weren't here when you came in. Nice to see you. And remembering, right? Just keep noticing, where are you right now? How does it feel to be where you are? Right? As you move toward a future that's unpredictable or predictable, whatever you think it is, right? How does it feel to be where you are? And maybe one thing I've really leaned on in the last 6 years, if there's a side I'm afraid of and people there aren't afraid, they're the ones I actually want to learn from. I don't need to learn from people that are as afraid as I am. I already have those fears. They live in me. I want to hear another perspective and see, ooh, where does that take me? So consider that in our ongoing alchemy around this work. I want to give big thanks to Monica Guzman for celebrating her birthday with us. Thank you, love. Anyone put up some final birthday emojis, feel free. It was a pleasure to have you here. I've learned so much from you. She has an amazing podcast called A Braver Way, which I definitely recommend. And I want to thank you, Camille, as always, for so impeccably holding this space and bringing your beautiful wisdom to it. And everyone on my team, Marika and Evan, and everyone here that came. So feel free to unmute and say goodbye, and we are off.